Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The steel tip of the sword pressed against his jugular, drawing a single, perfect bead of crimson that rolled down the curve of his pale neck like a tear. "Give me one reason," the deep, velvet voice rumbled, vibrating through the cold blade and into Julian's very bones. "Why I shouldn't mount your pretty head on a pike outside the obsession gate." Julian gasped, the air catching in his throat as his eyes flew open. The world spun in a kaleidoscope of dizzying gold and shadows. He wasn't in his studio apartment anymore. He was on his knees on hard, polished obsidian, surrounded by the oppressive grandeur of a throne room that smelled of incense and old blood. And towering above him, looking like a dark god carved from nightmare and desire, was Kalen Thorne, the tyrant emperor, the blood king, and the primary antagonist of the web novel Julian had fallen asleep reading just hours ago. Panic clawed at Julian's chest. He knew this scene. This was the opening chapter. The moment the villain, Kalen, discovers his favorite consort, Julian Vane, is a spy for the rebellion. In the book, Vane stammers, begs for mercy, and is executed on page 5, fueling the righteous rage of the hero, Sir Alaric. But Julian didn't want to die. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. The memories of the original body owner, Vane, surged forward, a sickening cocktail of fear and a pathetic, desperate love for Alaric, the hero who had sent him here to die. Julian gritted his teeth, forcing the original host's emotions down. He looked up, meeting Kalen's gaze. The Emperor's eyes were the color of burning brimstone, narrowed in predatory amusement. "Well," Kalen pressed, twisting the sword slightly. "The silence is boring me, little spy." Julian swallowed the scream, rising in his throat. He couldn't beg. Kalen Thorne despised weakness. "Because," Julian whispered, his voice trembling but clear, "if you kill me, you'll never know why the hero sent me to poison you tonight." Kalen froze. The heavy silence of the throne room was suffocating. The guards lining the walls tensed, hands hovering over their weapons. "You admit it," Kalen murmured, a dangerous smile curling his lips. He withdrew the blade by an inch, crouching down so his face was level with Julian's. "You admit you are Alaric's whore." "I was," Julian corrected, the lie tasting like ash on his tongue. He had to pivot. He had to survive. But a dead spy is useless to everyone. A double agent, however, is a weapon. Kalen studied him, searching for the deception. The Emperor's hand, gloved in black leather, reached out and gripped Julian's chin, forcing his head back. "You have exactly 3 days," Kalen hissed. "If you do not prove your worth by then, I will feed you to the hounds myself." He shoved Julian backward. "Get him out of my sight." The Imperial Palace was a gilded cage, beautiful and terrifying. Julian, now trapped in the body of the traitor consort, spent the first day in a haze of panic and tactical planning. The memories of Julian Vane were intrusive. Every time he looked at the mirror and saw the delicate features, silver hair, violet eyes, a slender frame built for seduction rather than war, he felt a phantom ache in his chest. It was Vane's love for Alaric. Alaric, the Golden Knight. The protagonist. The man who had promised Vane a life of happiness once the tyrant was dead. Liar. Julian muttered to his reflection. As a reader, he had liked Alaric. But living inside the story, the perspective shifted. Alaric had sent an untrained, fragile civilian into the lion's den with a vial of poison and a kiss on the forehead. That wasn't love, that was sacrifice. Julian's survival depended on subverting the plot. He needed to become indispensable to Kalen, the man destined to burn the world down. On the second night, the summons came. Not to the dungeon, but to the Emperor's private study. The room was vast, lined with books and lit by the glow of a fireplace that cast long, dancing shadows. Kalen sat behind a desk of dark mahogany, reviewing parchment maps. He didn't look up when Julian entered. "Pour the wine," Kalen commanded. Julian obeyed. His hands shook slightly as he lifted the heavy crystal decanter. He could feel Kalen's eyes on him now, a weight physically heavier than the crystal. "You claim to be useful," Kalen said, his voice low. "Prove it. Where will Alaric strike next?" This was the test. In the novel, Alaric's next move was a surprise ambush on the western supply lines. Vane had known this, but died before he could confess. The Western Road, Julian said softly, pouring the crimson liquid into the goblet. He plans to starve the capital before the winter solstice. He has secured an alliance with the merchant guilds to block the grain shipments. Kalen finally looked up, his expression unreadable. That is classified information. Even my generals suspect the Northern Front. Alaric is not a general. He is a populist, Julian replied, leaning against the desk, daring to invade the Emperor's personal space. He fights with hunger and narratives, not just swords. He wants the people to blame you for their empty bellies. Kalen stood up slowly. He walked around the desk, looming over Julian. The power radiating off him was intoxicating, a dark, magnetic pull that terrified Julian, while simultaneously sparking a heat low in his belly. This man was a monster, yes, but he was honest about his monstrosity. If you are lying, Kalen whispered, leaning close enough that his breath ghosted over Julian's ear, I will peel the skin from your bones. And if I am right? Julian challenged, turning his head so their noses almost brushed. Kalen paused. For a fleeting second, the cruelty in his eyes dimmed, replaced by genuine curiosity. Then perhaps you are not the fragile glass doll I thought you were. The intelligence proved true. 3 days later, Kalen's forces intercepted the ambush on the Western Road. The supply lines remained open. The capital was fed. Julian was not executed. Instead, he was moved from the servants' quarters to the wing adjacent to the Emperor's own chambers. It was a promotion, but also a leash. Kalen wanted him close. As the weeks turned into months, a strange, volatile dynamic formed between them. Julian became Kalen's shadow. He sat in on war councils, offering insights drawn from his knowledge of the novel's plot, disguised as intuition. He saw sides of the villain that the book never described. He saw Kalen pacing at 3 a.m, plagued by insomnia and the weight of a crumbling empire. He saw Kalen refusing to tax the poor districts, draining the royal treasury instead to repair the aqueducts. He saw a man who had become a tyrant because the world had given him no other way to keep it from tearing itself apart. And Kalen saw Julian. He saw the way Julian flinched when voices were raised, a remnant of Vane's trauma, and began speaking in lower, softer tones. He noticed when Julian was cold and wordlessly draped his own fur-lined cloak over his shoulders during late-night strategizing. It was a slow, agonizing burn, a dance of predators learning to trust. But the ghost of the plot still haunted them. One rainy afternoon, a maid slipped a note into Julian's hand while delivering tea. The paper was scented with lavender, Alaric's signature. * midnight. The weeping willow in the East Garden. I'm coming for you, my love. *. Julian's blood ran cold. The original Vane's heart leaped with joy, a visceral physical reaction that made Julian nauseous. The system, the narrative force of the world, was trying to pull him back to the script. He had to go. If he didn't, Alaric might storm the palace prematurely. The East Garden was shrouded in mist. Rain slicked the cobblestones. Under the drooping branches of the ancient willow, a hooded figure waited. Julian. Alaric lowered his hood. He was undeniably handsome. Golden hair, eyes like the summer sky, a jawline cut from marble. The very image of a savior. He rushed forward, grabbing Julian's shoulders. I was so worried, Alaric breathed, his eyes scanning Julian for injuries. Has he hurt you? Has the beast touched you? Julian stepped back, removing Alaric's hands. The touch felt wrong. Clammy. I am fine, Alaric. Alaric blinked, confused by the coldness. Fine? You are a prisoner. But not for long. Tonight, I bring you freedom. He reached into his tunic and pulled out a small, ornate dagger. The blade shimmered with a greenish hue. Venom of the Hydrea, Alaric whispered conspiratorially. One scratch is enough. You sleep in his chambers now, don't you? Wait until he sleeps. End this, Julian. Be the hero I know you are. Julian stared at the dagger. This was the pivotal scene. In the original story, Vane never got the chance. Now, Julian held the fate of the story in his hands. You want me to murder him in his sleep? Julian asked, his voice flat. It is justice, Alaric insisted, his handsome face twisting into a sneer of self-righteousness. He is a monster. He is the villain of this world. We are the good guys, Julian. remember? Good guys don't ask their lovers to become assassins, Julian said quietly. Alaric's expression hardened. Do not forget who you belong to, Julian. You are mine. You have always been mine. I belong to no one. A twig snapped. Alaric spun around. From the shadows of the garden archway, a tall figure emerged. The rain slid off Kalen's black armor. He held no weapon, but his presence alone was sharper than any blade. How touching, Kalen drawled, though his eyes were murderous. The reunion of the star-crossed lovers. Monster, Alaric hissed, raising the poisoned dagger. Kalen, wait, Julian shouted, stepping between them. Kalen stopped, his gaze locking onto Julian. The betrayal in the Emperor's eyes was devastating. It wasn't the anger of a tyrant. It was the resignation of a man who expected to be stabbed in the back. Step aside, Julian, Kalen said, his voice devoid of emotion. Go to him. It is what you wanted, isn't it? To be saved by your knight. No, Julian said. Alaric grabbed Julian's arm. Julian, come on. He's distracted. We can run. Julian looked at Alaric, the hero who saw him as a tool. Then he looked at Kalen, the villain who looked at him like he was the only star in a dark sky. Julian wrenched his arm free from Alaric. I'm not going anywhere. Alaric gasped. He has brainwashed you. He treats me like a person, Julian snapped. You treated me like a pawn. Kalen's eyes widened. The rain plastered his dark hair to his forehead, making him look younger, vulnerable. You chose me? Kalen asked, the question fragile. Always, Julian breathed. With a roar of fury, Alaric lunged. Not at Kalen, but at Julian. If I cannot have you, no one will. The poisoned dagger arced down. There was a sickening sound of tearing flesh. But pain didn't hit Julian. He opened his eyes to see Kalen standing before him, his broad back acting as a shield. The dagger was buried deep in Kalen's shoulder. No, Julian screamed. Kalen didn't flinch. He reached up, grabbed Alaric by the throat with his uninjured arm, and lifted the hero off the ground. You made a mistake, Kalen snarled, his eyes glowing with demonic energy. You touched what is mine. With a flick of his wrist, Kalen threw Alaric across the garden. The hero crashed into the stone wall and slumped. Unconscious or dead, it didn't matter. Kalen swayed. The poison was fast. Julian caught him as he fell, their knees hitting the wet mud together. Kalen, stay with me. You stayed, Kalen whispered, his hand reaching up to touch Julian's cheek, smearing blood on his pale skin. You stayed. I'm here. I'm not leaving, Julian sobbed, pressing his hands over the wound. Guards. Healers. Someone help. The following week was a blur of agony. The Hydria poison was potent, designed to kill gods. Kalen burned with fever, hallucinating, thrashing against the restraints the healers were forced to use. Julian did not leave his side. He slept in a chair next to the royal bed, hand-feeding Kalen broth, wiping the sweat from his brow, whispering stories from his own world to anchor the Emperor's drifting mind. The court whispered. They called Julian the sorcerer consort. They said he had bewitched the Emperor. They didn't understand. On the 7th night, the fever broke. Julian was dozing, his head resting on the mattress, his hand loosely holding Kalen's. He felt a squeeze. He jolted awake. Kalen was looking at him. His face was gaunt, his skin pale, but his eyes were clear. The brimstone fire was back. You look terrible, Kalen rasped. Julian laughed, a wet, choked sound. You should see yourself, Your Majesty. Kalen tugged on his hand. Come here. Julian hesitated, then climbed onto the massive bed, careful of the Emperor's bandaged shoulder. He lay down beside him, facing him. The intimacy was overwhelming. There were no more walls, no more titles. Just two men who had survived the narrative trying to kill them. Why? Kalen asked softly. You could have let him kill me. You could have taken the throne. You could have gone home. This is my home, Julian admitted, the truth settling in his heart. I realized. I don't want a hero, Kalen. Heroes are bound by rules and expectations. They sacrifice the one to save the many. Julian reached out, tracing the sharp line of Kalen's jaw. I want the villain. Because the villain would burn the world to save the one person he loves. Kalen's breath hitched. He closed the distance between them, pressing his forehead against Julian's. Then let it burn, he whispered. As long as you are standing in the ashes with me. Kalen kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It was possessive, desperate, tasting of survival and iron. It was a claim. Julian melted into it, his fingers tangling in Kalen's hair, pulling him closer. The transmigrator and the tyrant, rewriting the ending with every breath, every touch. The war wasn't over. Alaric had escaped the garden, and the rebellion would regroup. But the story had changed fundamental axis. The villain was no longer alone, and the spy was no longer pretending. As Kalen pulled back, his eyes dark with promise, Julian smiled. A sharp, dangerous smile that belonged to the empress of a dark empire. Now, Julian whispered, let's go destroy a hero. And that is how the spy stole the villain's heart and doomed the hero's revolution. If you enjoyed watching Kalen realize that love is the most dangerous weapon of all, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, is it better to be the righteous sacrifice or the beloved villain? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt, masterpiece, best quality, high-res, 1.2. Korean manhwa style, semi-realistic, digital art, 2 men, BL, Yaoi, Man 1. Kalen Thorne, tall emperor, long black hair, sharp jawline, glowing amber eyes, wearing dark regal armor with fur collar, intense protective expression, blood on shoulder. Man 2. Julian, delicate features, silver hair, violet eyes, wearing white silk robes stained with mud and rain, holding Man 1. Desperate expression, tears. Background is a rainy Gothic garden at night, ancient weeping willow, fallen dagger on wet cobblestones, dramatic blue moonlight, emotional atmosphere, cinematic lighting, sharp focus, intricate details.